All right, we are here on the Larley Rosenberg YouTube channel to discuss an IRCC announcement from last week that both took a lot of people by surprise and also is something that people have been advocating for a while. My name is Steve Murins. I'm a partner at Larley Rosenberg, Barristers and Solicitors, joined by Nicole,
Hi.
lawyer extraordinaire with the firm. I don't know, Nicole, maybe do you want to just walk through? We've got, for those watching on YouTube, and I guess this is only being broadcast on video, so everybody who is watching can see what we've got up on the screen, which is the policy.
Sure. So I guess we should start with what we used to get. So what we used to get was just a really basic refusal letter that had sort of template bullet points for what the refusal reasons might be. And they were standardized language that was used across all applications. So you really weren't able to get a specific sense of what your application was lacking. And we used to have to make access to information requests for something called GCMS notes in order to see the officer's internal refusal reasons. And that would take a really long time. It would take at least 30 days for something to get back to us. Now, IRCC is proactively deciding to provide the officer decision notes. So they're not providing what we would get entirely through GCMS, but they are providing the essence of it, which is the internal refusal reasons that are tailored to your specific application. And so that's been a really big game changer because we used to have to go through lots of hoops and hurdles in order to get these, and now they're just giving them to people.
Yeah, it was always difficult when someone would come to us with a refusal and want to know the likelihood of success in seeking judicial review of the decision to give a firm answer. We could speculate that it was likely, say, that bulk processing software like Chinook may have been used in certain applications, but we definitely couldn't guarantee it, and it always introduced a bit of unpredictability to the judicial review process. That, for the types of applications that are encompassed by IRCC's new policy, will be greatly reduced, and there'll be a lot more certainty to those who are seeking judicial review. I don't know if you want to cover which type of applications. It says on the
Sure.
image that we've got.
So it's the temporary ones. So if you're applying for a travel visa, a visitor record study permit, or a work permit, temporary resident permits are not included for good reason. And permanent resident applications, PR cards, citizenships, those are not included either. But we see the bulk of our judicial review work in sort of like study permits and travel visas, anyways. And so this will greatly reduce sort of the back and forth. We decide on whether to go ahead with appeal for judicial review, sort of solely based on the internal refusal reasons. You can't really rely on the standard refusal letters that we used to get. And so this is going to greatly increase, like you said, the certainty.
Yeah. And the other distinction is that for permanent residents, refusals generally, although not always, are more detailed. So there was, especially with, say, things like express entry, the refusal letters at least gave some indication as to why it was refused. Whereas with temporary residence applications, it's not uncommon for those bullet point refusal letters that Nicole was describing to just say, we are refusing your application because you have not satisfied us that you will leave Canada by the end of the period authorized for your stay, because bullet point, the details that you have provided did not convince us that you would leave Canada at the end of the period authorized for your stay. So it was impossible to predict. Now, sort of there were two lines of discussion that emerged after the policy was announced. The first was, does this mean that the decisions are getting better? So I think initially on LinkedIn, a lot of people were saying, oh, there's going to be so much more transparency. We're going to get these very detailed officer notes. Do you want to, I think you've been sent one of these
Yeah.
refusals so far. Why don't you just share sort of like the level of detail that we're still getting?
Well, I think it's so we're getting, I think we suspect we're getting what you would get from like a GCMS pull. But the issue is that the internal refusal reasons, the quality is still really low. And I think it also really depends on the application type. Like for some of the more esoteric applications, I've received for internal refusal reasons like 5 pages of decisions. I remember I shared that with you, and you were like, that's crazy that we received that
Hmm.
much. But for something simple like a study permit or a travel visa refusal, we're still seeing the basic template language has also moved over into the internal refusal reasons that are supposed to be giving a higher level of detail. So, for example, I'm still getting stuff like, the financial situation is insufficient to support the stated purpose of travel. If I copy and paste that and I go through my bank of refusal reasons, I can probably see that exact sentence popping up in like 5 or 6 other travel visa refusal reasons. And so, what this means is that it's not specifically telling you the bank statement, like which bank statement you provided was the issue. Why do we feel like there wasn't enough funds in that one? Are we concerned about the source of the funds or the amount of funds? Like that's still all unknown. And so that's something that would need to be settled in a judicial review.
Yeah. And I mean, and even if the reasons still aren't great, it's a lot more certainty in the process. Like, there's no question that this will make judicial review more predictable, faster. And the reason it will be faster is because in many cases, you won't have to wait for the Rule 9 reasons anymore. You can just file the judicial review application, and then the applicant record would be due 75 days later. At some point, the public policy or the judicial order that they have now, making judicial review deadline 75 days, will go down to 30. But the point is that you don't need to wait for the Rule 9 refusal reasons, which will just match GCMS. And so this will be a lot faster, predictable, which leads into the second question. When would you still want to submit an ATIP or get the Rule 9 reasons?
So in that case, I feel like if you have a more complicated situation, you would still want to. So, for example, if some of the concerns were about sort inadmissibility issues, I would still submit a GCMS or an ATIP. I feel like.
Mhm.
Can you think of any other examples?
Procedural fairness letters.
Yeah.
Anytime that there's, because you want to see what led to the procedural fairness letter concerns, how did they respond to the procedural fairness letter? Like, it's still not clear, and there haven't just been enough samples as to whether these refusal letters are only going to contain the final GCMS note, or will it contain a meaningful record? And then how they're going to deal with redactions. There's sometimes in refusals where even ATIP requests will contain redactions, but the Rule 9 process won't. So, in those types of cases, it may still be worth getting the Rule 9 reasons. But I do think that, especially for the bulk of decisions where you can identify right away that this was made with Chinook, there's no procedural fairness letter, there's no admissibility concerns that may be documented before the actual refusal. I think that it will be the case that people can skip the Rule 9 process and just get their judicial review resolved that much faster.
Yeah. Mhm.
So I think that's all we had for today. Again, if any of the audience has any questions, you can definitely email Nicole or I, and we will see how it goes. I think we were both very pleasantly surprised and pleased with this development.
Yeah. Hopefully, this speeds things up for everybody. Mhm.
Awesome.